I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're speaking with author George Chris about his compelling memoir, My COVID Crucible, Living with a Pandemic. The author delves into the profound impact of the coronavirus pandemic that swept across the globe from March 2020 onwards. As he navigates the complexities of a world transformed by COVID-19, the author shares his personal journey of adaptation, illness, and recovery, offering a poignant perspective on the challenges faced during this unprecedented time. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Authors Reputation Press for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel. George, thanks so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Thank you, Logan. My pleasure.
Pleasure is all mine, sir. Tell a little bit about your own personal journey with COVID so the folks at home have a better understanding about the backstory on this book.
Well, my illness itself landed me in the hospital for 2 weeks. And I really denied at first that I was having a COVID experience, but then it became very clear that I was. Yeah. And through the course of my hospitalization, I was trying to just sort of absorb everything, not just the medical treatment, but the people who are around me caring for me, and those who are outside of the hospital experience thinking about me. And so I wrote down some things as I was in the hospital, and that became the book.
Why do you call it the COVID Crucible? We're all familiar with the famous book, The Crucible. Why do you call this the COVID Crucible?
First of all, I think it's my personal experience, the memoir of my COVID experience. Mm-hmm. And the title indicates the crucible makes me feel like it was a trial or the test of my life. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of it. But the subtitle, The Living with a Pandemic, is really somewhat self-explanatory, but I wanted to convey the idea that the pandemic was something that you can live through and not necessarily have it be a death sentence.
Yeah. It was a tough time, and no doubt for the people who got sick, for the people who lived through it. And I think fear was the greatest element of it all, because we saw these horrible pictures of people on ventilators in the hospital, unable to see family members and loved ones, people afraid to touch them in some circumstances. It was an awful, awful time.
Yes, it was. And I did not experience the ventilator. I came real close, but I did have the experience of not having loved ones being able to come and visit me in the hospital. And I had very limited contact with anyone other than nurses or doctors and aides. So it was very challenging in that regard.
Yeah, and I was there too. I had heart surgery in December 2020 during the pandemic, and everybody was scared to death. I mean, you were afraid, like, okay, I'm getting something done on my heart. This is awful. But what if I get COVID too? So yes. It was a tough time indeed. What do you hope people will learn from your own personal experience that might help them in dealing with similar disasters, perhaps even going forward?
I think one of the things is that I would hope people would learn that they are more resilient than they think they are. Mm-hmm. Even if they're at their lowest emotional or spiritual or physical ebb, they are more resilient than they think they are. They also have a network of support around them, even if they don't know it. And I'm not just talking about those in the medical profession. I'm thinking family support members and family friends, anybody else who is thinking, praying for you or whatever during a crisis like that. And that I guess the third thing is that you can survive a crisis. You can go on to the other side of it and look back at it and say, oh, what did I learn? What can I use out of that experience going forward? Yeah. So I think those three things are things I hope that people would get. I also want them to have a sense of hope despite their crisis.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hope is what helped everyone get through. What was your journey like after you got out of the hospital?
The recovery time was about 6 weeks for me, and it was a time of a kind of a time of tenderness. You know, I was trying to. I wasn't sure what I was capable of doing, and I was still on oxygen at home. I had an oxygen converter and 75 feet worth of oxygen hose, and through that, I learned that I could do more things than I thought I could do. And I went through a process where they weaned me off the oxygen. And so eventually I was able to do without it. And so that's part of the recovery experience for me. And again, the hospital provided a network of aftercare, and that was helpful.
Are you back to where you were before the illness?
I believe so. Yeah, I've been pretty strong for the last year and a half. I came out of that well, I recorded in the book from March to March, from 20 to 21. And so I was kind of back to work by the March of 2021.
Yeah.
And so I've been pretty well recovered since then. I've not had any long COVID symptoms or anything like that.
What month, what year were you hospitalized?
In December of 2020, before there were vaccines or boosters or anything like that. So
yeah, it's like I said, it was
your experience.
A very frightening time, indeed. What was it like writing the book? I know you began it during your hospitalization. How long did you work on it afterwards, and what was that like, reflecting upon all that had transpired?
As I said before, my book actually started when I was in the hospital.
Right.
I was trying to remember the names of the nurses and how they had helped me. And in particular, there were 4 that had an impact on me in the early stages. And then, so I wrote down on any piece of paper I could find. I started with paper towels from the restroom. And then whatever I would write on the back of a menu or a flyer or something, anything that I could get my hands on. And that I shared that blog. I call it a blog, even though I didn't publish it as a blog. Right. I shared that with some family and friends, and they said, "Oh, you need to write this book." So I really started writing it in the hospital, but I didn't start paying attention to writing it until maybe March or April, after I had been in the hospital. And I wrote for the better part of it, a year, maybe 10 to 11 months worth, and then began a process of sharing it with, I had a colleague who agreed to be an editor for me, and he did a lot to push me to say, do more than just reporting, but to talk about myself and about my feelings and what my experiences were. Yeah. So I added some to the book after that. My wife, Sue, also was very helpful in terms of helping me correct grammatical kinds of things, but also helping give my book a sense of authenticness for who I am. She really pushed for me to come out from that. And so over that 10 or 11 months, I really refined the book.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you got great input, you got great advice, and I think you're a naturally gifted writer as well, because it's very, very eloquently written. Tell me a little bit about the whole political debate revolving about the COVID pandemic. Do you think we underreacted, overreacted, shut down too long, didn't shut down soon enough? If we were to play Monday morning quarterback here, what would you say was done right? What would you say was done wrong?
I think that's a tough question.
Yeah.
So thank you for asking that.
Yeah.
I have the sense that some things were absolutely right. I think we needed to shut down. I think we needed to mask. I thought we needed to have the protocols we had in place. I think there are people who reacted poorly against that, thinking it was an impingement on their freedom somehow. And I thought that was regrettable. I thought the leadership coming from the science community was really strong and helpful. I thought some of the political voices were not so helpful. And it's not just because I have one leaning versus another. It's that, you know, when somebody suggests something outlandish to try and resolve or to kill the virus or whatever, that doesn't seem helpful to me.
Right.
But I think the COVID experience also created another way of dividing the country in many ways. Those who were of people of color often had a poorer response in terms of getting help that they needed. And so that kind of was exacerbated by the coronavirus. I was so sorry that folks had to be in bodies had to be stored in refrigerated trucks.
I know.
You know, it was an overwhelming time, and it's often a sense that we didn't know what to do with this. This is something we had not experienced. So I think in the political divide, there were too many voices saying too many things. And for me, it elevated from a public health crisis to a political debate.
Yeah.
And I think that was unfortunate for our country.
Exactly. The name of the book is My COVID Crucible, Living with a Pandemic. The author delves into the profound impact of this disease that swept across the globe starting in March 2020. George, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
The pleasure is all mine. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time, this time until next time on Spotlight.